Good morning, good afternoon. A warm welcome to all our attendees today from across the globe. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on managing self-organized Scrum teams. I'm Lisa Glenn, your host and presenter for today's session, and joining me as the expert speaker is Carvey, Director of Engineering here at Impetus, who also is a certified Scrum Master. So let's go ahead and take a look at what today's session has in store for us. Scrum is one of the most popular and widely used Agile methodologies. It encourages self-organized, empowered teams where the team members have more freedom vis-a-vis the traditional environment. However, the leaders at all levels have a real challenge to balance this freedom with the need for predictable outcomes. In our session today, we will introduce self-organizing teams and then highlight the problems and solutions for building and sustaining self-organizing teams. So first off, Scrum advocates self-managed teams. The team members of Scrum projects expect autonomy and a higher degree of freedom. Self-organizing teams is one of the challenging concepts in Scrum. All practices and events that Scrum mandates are to be run by the team members themselves rather than by the leader. The Scrum teams are empowered and participate actively and collectively in all the activities. So the product owner explains to the Scrum team what is required in the next sprint, and the team works out details as to who will work on what, as well as how much time they may take, and consequentially, how much work can be taken up in a particular sprint. The detailing and planning is done by the team, and the Scrum Master is basically there to help them if that's what's required. So technically, the Scrum team is self-directed as opposed to being controlled from the top. Now, as you might expect, leaders from non-Scrum projects may have some difficulty in adjusting to this methodology. They're pretty much used to assigning tasks and really may not take well to the team making pertinent decisions without their approval or counsel. However, it's also up to the leaders to balance the team's freedom with those predictable outcomes. The biggest facilitator of building and maintaining a self-organizing team is a sharing and learning environment. Scrum highly recommends that people within the team interact and share their learning and knowledge with the other team members. This way, they can continue to learn from their peers and their seniors. And let me just explain this with an example. Say, if a planning item is taken up and one of the junior members in the team says he'll take around 8 hours to finish a particular task. Now, there may be a relatively senior person within that team who feels that this task can be accomplished within 4 hours. This person can just go ahead and share his views and suggestions with his peer, along, of course, with a reasonable explanation. Sharing and learning is a vital part of self-organizing, and we believe that the team learns more vis-a-vis the traditional environment. They also absorb more as they observe their teammates accomplishing the tasks due to the proximity and bonding that occurs. Scrum brings together a team with different exposure, experience, and background, and really encourages bonding through frequent interactions. So say in a scenario where one member may be unavailable due to any emergency, the other is likely to come forward and just volunteer to do his task due to their bond as well as the shared commitment over the sprint goals. Now, this is made considerably easier as the team members are also aware of the tasks assigned to their peers. Now, we've tried to group the challenges into two broad categories. And the first one that we're going to discuss today are the ones that we face while building self-organizing teams. And after discussing these, we're going to talk about addressing the challenges of managing those self-organizing teams. The first pain area of building a self-organizing Scrum team is inertia. Now, on your screen now, you can see what the latest Scrum Guide has to say with respect to this particular issue. And let me read it and explain. Scrum roles, artifacts, events, and rules are immutable. This signifies that the rules, roles, and artifacts that are laid out by the Scrum Guide are mandatory, and there is no scope for any change or customizations at all. And I just want to quickly note that the Scrum Guide, also called Rule Book of Scrum, is compiled by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. So in Scrum, there are certain rules and guidelines that you would need to follow consistently. Now, this may contrast with the expectations we might have while adopting Scrum, as it generally assumes that Agile gives more room for flexibility and leeway. Organizations may be tempted not to follow all the practices mandated by Scrum. Additionally, they may also decide not to let go of the practices they followed in the traditional methodology, thereby adopting a sort of watered-down version of Scrum. Our recommendation to the leaders and decision makers is not to give in to such temptations. They need to understand the reasons why Scrum is insisting on these rules and be able to explain them to all concerned. They should ideally also mandate that all the rules and guidelines be followed consistently. This would ensure a smooth adoption of Scrum methodology throughout the length and breadth of the organization. Now, while Scrum may appear to be non-intuitive in the beginning, it has to be put in practice by the leadership at all levels to really reap its benefits. The next challenge that we're going to discuss is managing different personality types within the team. And as I'm sure you all know, in the workplace, we meet all kinds of different people. Some are loners who are happy pattering away on their keyboard all day without surfacing for any meetings or social interactions with their coworkers. Now, on the other hand, there are the socializers who can spend endless hours interacting, discussing, and comparing notes. Similarly, you have aggressive people as well as passive people in one single team. So while building the team, you should also pay attention to what kinds of personality types you're bringing into the mix. You should certainly avoid having similar kinds of people, but at the same time, also keep a check on bringing together people who are poles apart in their disposition. The right mix of people with diverse perspectives and different ways of thinking can work wonders for a project. They will be able to come together and work in a collaborative fashion with each other, thereby bringing a lot more value to the project. At the same time, bringing together people with extreme temperaments may unfortunately have an adverse effect on team productivity and morale. As per our experience, it's likely that you may have to shuffle teams multiple times to find the best team dynamic. Now on to the next challenge area, which comes due to the personality clashes within the team. Though a project team can be quite large in size, each of the Scrum teams is purposely small to facilitate interaction and collective participation in all Scrum events. These teams are also cross-functional. That implies that the developers, testers, technical writers, etc. have to work closely as a team. Now, the team members who have previously worked on non-Scrum projects may bring with them their old prejudices and notions to the new team. And I want to just ask Harvey right now to come in and explain what this may spell for your project. Harvey?
Thank you, Lisa. And hello, audience. Welcome to our webinar. Now moving on from where Lisa left, let me explain. As we know, Scrum has cross-functional teams, which means that everybody who is required for working on sprint is part of the team, whether they are developers, testers, tech writers, or anybody else. Normally we tend to assume that just by putting them together, we hope that they will automatically start working well with each other. This just doesn't happen because developers have been used to being bonded, they have loyalty to their group of developers, and sometimes they look to other roles like testers with suspicion. Now this can potentially create clashes. We have seen many a times that developers and testers in a Scrum team find it difficult to work with each other in the kind of environment that is expected by Scrum, because they still expect the work to be handed over to them in a formal manner. But the intimacy and speed that Scrum insists on just does not leave room for such luxuries. Another issue in Scrum is that all team members are just called developers irrespective of their roles. This is important to create the bonding. But where there are test engineers who are testing the code and tech writers who are doing documentation, they think that they are different from developers. And they sort of lose identity of their roles. So this does create a problem. And in such cases, it is always good that Scrum Master takes care of such issues. Another thing that we have seen is clashes also come due to the nature of the work and dependencies on each other. For example, the testers can test only after the developers have done their part of the coding. So when in short cycles of sprint, maybe of 2 to 3 weeks, if there is any delay from developer side in giving the code to the testers to test, they really feel the pressure and have a feeling of being squeezed in the process. In such a scenario, we would recommend slicing up the development task in such a manner that development and testing happens in small chunks, with both of them working very closely with each other. But this does not happen automatically. It needs a conscious effort from the Scrum Master. He has to make sure that such issues are sorted out and there is a collective participation of team members in all Scrum events. Because when people are working together, they come to know each other, their differences tend to diminish. Even if there are differences, they are open to them. They will listen to each other and they are able to work much better with each other. There is another issue that comes up when people from non-Scrum projects come to Scrum. Because in many organizations we have also seen that the vertical hierarchies are built for developers separately, where developers may be reporting to their development manager, who in turn reports to the director of engineering, and similarly there may be a vertical hierarchical structure for testers. Now they tend to, in case of any problem, they tend to move up and down the hierarchy for solving them. Now Scrum doesn't have so much time, and it requires that developers tester in a small Scrum team can work together and sort out the problems quickly with each other. So in such cases, the management, the leaders need to take adequate actions to flatten the structure and remove such harmful hierarchical structures which create silos. Lisa, you may like to take over.
Sure, thanks Carve, that was great. We're now going to talk about the challenges that come up in the case of distributed teams. In an ideal scenario, the Scrum teams would get the maximum benefit of close interactions if they are co-located. However, multi-location teams are very much a reality. Now, while they pose special challenges, it is absolutely possible to overcome them and encourage smooth and transparent interactions within the team. In case of multi-location teams within the same organization, the problems are easily addressed as the organization culture, practices, and management is the same across the locations. However, to facilitate seamless interaction within the multi-locational teams, the organization must provide for a high-quality communication infrastructure. It would also make sense to have people travel and spend time with their team members at the other locations. This can further be aided by merely encouraging informal interaction within the team members beyond the task discussions. They can just chat about common interests beyond work, such as sports, families, children, etc. This practice actually facilitates rapport and empathy for each other. So the more we encourage a common shared language, the easier the flow of communication becomes. In our next slide, we will discuss the problems and solutions of multi-organizational teams. In offshore software development, sometimes the Scrum team may comprise multi-service vendors. In this scenario, the team is distributed not only across locations, but also through organizations, cultures, and perhaps time zones. In such a case, the challenges would increase further. Now, in our previous slide, we already covered the challenges that come up due to different locations, which is also very valid for this particular challenge area. But since we just covered that, we're going to move on to discuss some other problem areas. Scrum says that the product owner is the only person accountable and responsible for managing the product backlog. This, of course, necessitates his close interaction with the team. Now, the challenge comes in when the product owner and the team belong to different organizations or culture. Carve, why don't you share the solution to this critical problem area for us?
Sure, Lisa. See, as we have seen, the product owner is the only person who can decide priorities, who is the central point of contact for the team for knowing all the requirements. So therefore, it becomes very critical that he is available to the team as and when required. Now, this is easier when we are working in a single organization where the product owner knows the team intimately well and therefore is able to make himself available easily. But when we go to multiple locations and more so multiple organizations being involved, it tends to happen that product owner is available at his location within his organization, but really not available when he is required to others. And this can create a lot of problems in terms of team not being really aware fully about what the requirements are. Whenever they need certain clarifications, they don't know whom to go to. And this affects both the productivity as well as the outcome of the sprint. Another challenge that comes up is when there are people from multiple organizations having different work culture, then facilitating their communication is of prime importance. We all know the best practices for intercultural communication, but I would like to stress here that it is very important for the leaders or management to make sure that people in their organization are encouraged to be open to others, to be tolerant to different ways of working, different ways of thinking. Then only they will be able to really work as a single team. Another interesting thing that we have found works quite well is in such scenarios is that the Scrum Master is close to the team generally, and he is really aware of the needs of the people. So he could act as a proxy product owner. That does not, of course, mean that he will be taking away the authority of product owner to prioritize the product backlog item, which solely depends on him. But he can certainly act as an effective bridge between the team and the product owner. And we have seen this solution working very well in many of similar situations in projects at Impetus. Lisa, you may like to take over from here.
Thanks, Karve. And now on to the next section of our presentation. As we discussed, building self-organized teams is tough, but sustaining them is tougher. So far, we've discussed the first set of challenges of building these teams, and now I want to talk about effectively managing them. One of the most common arguments against having all the team members participating in the important Scrum events is that it could be time-consuming, thereby directly impacting the productivity of individual team members. Let's look at how collective participation in sprint planning meetings can actually help the productivity. Sprint planning meetings are the time when the team goes into the details of product backlog items proposed by the product owner for the coming sprint. And though it may appear that it would be more efficient to carry out this activity in a smaller group, the collective participation of all team members facilitates enhanced knowledge sharing. The team can eventually come up with a much better estimation and plan together. We recommend preparing for the sprint planning meeting where the team can start its orientation process by gathering pertinent information and requirements from the product owner or business analyst. Now, the purpose of the planning meeting is to get everyone on the same page and facilitate awareness and understanding. Furthermore, having everyone present and aware about each other's tasks can really come in handy in case a particular team member is not available. Another factor is that the user stories are very rarely independent. There is some connection, some dependency, some interrelation all the time. So in such cases, having a bigger picture of what other people are supposed to do and the ideal outcome of the user story helps. The learning and the exposure that the team members get by actively participating in all the events also considerably reduces the rework and the delays. It also enables them to take proactive decisions and actions. So, in fact, the result of having these meetings is achieving overall higher productivity. So, moving on to our next challenge, which is measurement and reporting, or rather the lack of it. So, Scrum per se has no traditional status reports or measurements. It says that the work remaining and data review are the only variables of interest, but they must be religiously updated every day. However, the leaders coming in from non-Scrum backgrounds are usually uncomfortable with this lack of exhaustive measurements and detailed status reports. And remember, this does not mean that there is a lack of information pertaining to the current project status. It's just not in the format that they're used to. Rather than the information coming to the leaders as status reports, they have to go and actively seek it out. Now, Scrum encourages a high level of visibility and transparency. The daily updated sprint backlog contains the current status, whereas the burn down chart gives out the early warning signals. Incidentally, you can also use it to ensure that the team is going to complete the tasks within the stipulated time. The intermediate review of deliverables as and when they are available also helps engaging that the product is on the right track. We'll now talk about team accountability. Scrum says that the selection of product backlog for the sprint is solely up to the development team and not on any particular individual or external stakeholder. It also mandates that the Scrum Master should ensure that the development team has a daily stand-up meeting, but he should not conduct that meeting. So essentially, the Scrum Master's role is very limited in terms of accountability. It is the entire team who's accountable, and therefore there's no way you can have one particular person accountable for any tasks or goof-ups. And this can potentially develop into a very serious problem. Carvey, how do you propose that we sort this out?
Lisa, the solution really lies in ensuring that every team member identifies with the team, really identifies, he feels he is the team. He must consider team success as his individual success and team failure as his own failure. Now, active and collective participation by all members in all the team events is therefore very critical to create this kind of bonding. Now, we see cases, case after case, again and again, that the teams tend to forgo this very important practice. They feel, again, as you mentioned, that productivity may get affected. So therefore, it is for the management to make sure that they should definitely attend all the meetings. I mean, all the team members should attend all the meetings, and it carries on as a habit. Another thing is that daily stand-up meetings and the retrospective meetings at the end of the sprint are really the places where such issues come up. And that is the place where the Scrum Master can effectively curb them, because the team members coming from non-Scrum background are so used to be protective, and the moment any blame is made, they get immediately on the defensive. So it is very important that such buck passing, blame games should be highly discouraged, and I really believe that building a right culture of openness, understanding each other, and at the same time being very frank and forthright is very critical to success of the Scrum. I would also like to add one more thing that we have learned is that the Scrum Master can look for weakest links within the team in such respect, because those are the people who create maximum problems, and he will either try to get them in line, or if it becomes necessary, such team members may have to be rotated outside the team to make sure that team can work cohesively and continue to work thereafter. That is all I would like to say on this.
Thanks, Carvey. And now let's move on to our next slide, which pertains to the loss of control of other stakeholders and key executives over the team. Scrum provides a well-protected and secure environment for the team to work in. It says that the self-organizing teams choose the best way to work. And though people outside the team may share their well-meaning advice, the team ultimately has to decide what makes sense to them and why. Now, though this is highly empowering for the team members, it also may lead to these external stakeholders feeling a loss of control over the team, as they're pretty much used to telling the project teams what to do, by whom, and when to do it. We believe that the problems come in as the external stakeholders are comparatively senior in experience and designation vis-a-vis the Scrum team members, and just would not take well to having their suggestions bypassed. Now, the solution lies in bringing about a mindset change for the external stakeholders by just explaining to them how this freedom and empowerment to the team can pay rich dividends in the long run. They will feel just more comfortable when they know that there are no risks on the way to sprint success. And they can refer to the daily updated sprint backlog and accompanying burn down chart. Armed with this information, they can carry out intermediate reviews with the product owners. So we discussed the loss of control that the top management and stakeholders may feel over the Scrum teams. And now we're going to talk about the loss of freedom that they may feel due to these introductions of changes during a running sprint. As per Scrum, once the sprint has started, you can't change anything unless it's going to help the sprint goal. This is essential because the team is held accountable for the product backlog that they've agreed to take up. Any deviation may have a dire consequences, such as lower team morale or actual sprint failure. In the traditional methodology, top executives and stakeholders were able to request changes in any particular stage of the SDLC. Since Scrum takes away this freedom, this potentially may lead to some conflicts internally. I want to reiterate once again that the key executives should bring about a change in their attitude and accept the Scrum rules and principles when the organization decides to go ahead and adopt Scrum methodology. However, Scrum does permit any changes beyond the current sprint. So the stakeholders need to think proactively and anticipate any required changes before a sprint is finalized. I'd like to share with you all that the latest 2011 Scrum Guide has added a provision that says that for every sprint, there should be a defined goal. This enables accommodating the changes provided if they are helpful for achieving the sprint goal. And lastly, the product owner has an option to cancel a running sprint and start a new sprint afresh if there is just no way that the sprint goal can be met. Now, this is an extreme step, and it really should be used with caution. Now on to the next challenge, which is bringing about the big shift. So basically, the Scrum Master is considered a servant leader by Scrum. Scrum places a low importance on the top-down hierarchy as it gives greater autonomy and freedom to the team. The Scrum Master no longer has the benefit of the status and respect that automatically comes in with that position. He has to earn it by serving the team, and that completely changes the focus of his work. A self-organized team takes over a lot of his traditional work of planning and monitoring, whether it relates to the tasks or people. The Scrum Master is now free, though, to use his time to help the team members develop themselves. He can also enjoy his contribution to the progress of the project by using his experience and reaching out in the organization to solve the problems that hold up their work. He's really able to relish the close bond that develops with them, not because of his status, but because of his role as guide and facilitator. Now, let me stress that this does not mean that the Scrum Master position is any less important. He just can now add a lot more value, not just to the team, but the product owner and also to the organization. The challenge comes if the person chosen to be a Scrum Master is uncomfortable with his new role and has different expectations from all around him. If he comes from a command and control culture, he would find it quite tough to adjust in the Scrum project, and unfortunately, as a result, the whole project would suffer. Therefore, it's very important to choose the right person to be the Scrum Master. So, ladies and gentlemen, these were the challenges and solutions of building and managing self-organizing teams. The task by itself is challenging, but also highly rewarding. The issues and problems surface as there's boundaries and just preconceived notions that are to be demolished. In Scrum, team bonding is encouraged and far greater autonomy is given to the team, but with that, they also have a greater responsibility. The distributed and multi-organization teams have their own special challenges and workarounds specific to them. And lastly, I'd just like to reiterate that the Scrum Masters are the biggest change managers and have a diverse role in ensuring a smooth transition of the organization and top executives into Scrum. Now, before we move on to the questions, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Impetus Technologies. So here at Impetus, we offer product engineering and technology R&D services for product software development, with ongoing investments in research and application of emerging technology areas, innovative business models, and an agile approach. We partner with our client base comprising large-scale ISVs and technology innovators to deliver cutting-edge software products. Our expertise spans the domains of large data management, data analytics, cloud computing, mobile, testing, performance engineering, social media, web technologies, open source, among others. Okay, so it looks like we've got some questions that have come in, and Carvey, I'm going to ask these to you. It looks like our first question is, what techniques can you recommend to encourage a team to take ownership and become self-organizing rather than relying on more senior and experienced people in the process? Carvey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. What techniques can you recommend to encourage a team to take ownership and become self-organizing rather than relying on? So I think let me clarify here. There are two ways you can look at this. Either the team continues to rely and look up to the senior experienced people for bringing about this process. Another way is they do it on their own, but they are empowered, they are helped by the senior management or others. I think what really works is team takes the initiative and they get the support, they get the empowerment from the management. Let me explain why I am saying so. People are used to behaving in a certain way. They take time to adjust. Initially, it becomes quite important that the differences in Scrum should be pointed out to them. Good habits should be encouraged. That is where the empowerment comes. And secondly, wherever interference is coming from others, once they start doing it, the team feels more empowered and they start taking their own decisions. They become more proactive. So it is more about using the support and doing it on their own. Another very interesting thing I have come across in the Scrum Guide 2011, which I had not seen in the earlier guides or suggestions from the authors of Scrum. That is, this time they have clearly separated out the rules, the essentials of Scrum into Scrum Guide and taking out everything else as strategies. That is a very important step they have taken, because now what is left in the Scrum Guide as essential things, those are really, really essential. And once the management, the leaders take care and make sure that essential things are taken care, automatically then the team finds it very easy to become self-organizing. It is not that they don't want to be self-organizing. It is when the bottlenecks or the hindrances are removed, it becomes very easy for them. I hope this answers your question.
Great, thanks, Carvey. Another member in the audience points out, he says that some studies show that technical debt and software bugs increase significantly with teams that are not co-located, irrespective of whether the teams are distributed onshore or offshore. Additionally, time and cultural differences of offshore teams increase technical debt even more. Carvey, what do you think about this?
This is really a challenge, but it's a fact of life that as the Scrum is getting adopted for bigger and bigger projects, as it is becoming more coming into the main line of software development, we need to face up this challenge and address it. I completely agree that it is difficult, but if you look at the terms we have used, technical debt or software bugs, they do increase because of the fact that what Scrum says, every item you take up must be fully done. So wherever this gets compromised, either because of not really taking care to complete everything that is taken up, or secondly, because of the communication differences, people not really understanding, talking to each other. So if they really follow all the practices that we talked of so far, all the suggestions we gave for handling such things, the whole idea is that the technological part of communication, of providing high quality video, audio, etc. is comparatively easier. It is when we come to the human aspect, it really requires special care by all concerned to make sure that people feel as if they are part of the same team. And the Scrum practices do help doing that, though it becomes not as easy if they are co-located, but it is possible to do it. And another thing, as I mentioned earlier in the Scrum Guide to 2011, they have also mentioned as one of the rules that in the sprint end retrospective, earlier it used to be thought that the only work to be done in retrospective is what went well, what did not, and what can be done better. Now they are emphasizing that the main purpose of retrospective is to learn and continuously improve the definition of done, tighten the definition of done. So if the practice of retrospection is really used for this purpose, it will definitely help to reduce the technical debt. Thank you.
That's great input, Carve. It looks like we have another question that someone asked, and this person says, you mentioned about the Scrum Guide 2011. Why is it important? So why is it important, Carve?
Right. So I talked about few things about Scrum Guide 11. Let me say one more thing. There is an accompanying document they have published along with it called Scrum Update. And that Scrum Update gives the background for the Scrum Guide. It takes a very good example from chess. In the game of chess, there are certain rules. Now those rules have to be followed. How the bishop will move or how pawn will move, how many places it can move. These are all rules. Anybody playing chess has to follow those rules. Whereas the players develop their own strategies for handling different situations. So this separation of rules and strategies is really one of the major changes I have seen in the Scrum Guide 2011, and that is why I kept repeating that all those who are seriously involved in Scrum should carefully study these two documents and really try and implement the rules. Though it may appear that Scrum or Agile shouldn't have any rules. I mean, that's, as I mentioned earlier also, that's a common perception that Agile means anything, everything is fine. The rules are important. They may appear to be non-intuitive at the beginning, but once they are put in practice, they definitely show the benefits. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we've got another question that came in, and this one asks, how does undoing the hierarchical structures address problems that come up during personality clashes?
Okay. Right. So partially I answered this question when I was speaking. Probably this question might have been asked before I came to that. So I'll repeat some of the things. traditionally in non-Scrum projects, the kind of vertical structures tend to develop where people from same role, same kind of work build up their group loyalties. And I have seen in my experience that this can become a major cause of conflicts between testers and developers, who are the two main pillars of software development. And in Scrum teams, the developers and testers have to work together like they're close friends. They must have good rapport. It does not mean that tester will allow a bug to go unnoticed. It does not mean that he will not challenge if there is a problem in development. That is of course there. But the kind of ego problems that come up because of the vertical hierarchy creating silos in the organization, that needs to be broken down. And that is where again the management's role becomes quite important. Thank you.
Thanks, Parvez. And it looks like we have run out of time, but we're going to address the remaining questions that we've received by email to everyone. Now, some of those questions include, what is the importance of testing automation and which tools do you use for that? Another one asks, is it possible to avoid having a Scrum Master in a team? Someone else wanted to know if we could elaborate on how the Scrum Master can be the proxy product owner, and how can sharing and learning avoid rework and delays? So we're going to address again those questions in a follow-up email to you. Thank you again for your great questions. And I'd just really like to thank you all for your time. We really hope that this discussion was a learning experience for you and will add value to your Scrum initiatives. Now, if you have any further questions, please email us at inquiry@impetus.com, or you can visit our website, www.impetus.com. The webinar was recorded and will be available in the archive section of our website by next week. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us today, and have a great day.